Lift is about a team of art thieves led by Kevin Hart who are asked by Interpol to steal a shipment of gold that would be used to pay for terrorist actions. It's your straightforward team heist movie, complete with fun gadgets, a large cast, and some big adventurous twists. The tone of the movie is right on, light, playful, friendly. The problem is that we don't actually get enough time with our ensemble cast or glimpses into their personalities or roles in the story, so we don't feel the same camaraderie that we get in other ensemble heist films like Ocean's 11 or Sneakers. It makes it feel a little bit like a knockoff version of one of those better stories, like it took a shortcut through character development to make way for cool set pieces. Granted, the character development bar for the genre isn't extremely high, so it doesn't destroy the film by any means, but it settles it into a place of mediocrity. A perfectly okay movie. The Virtuous Sin tells the story of a scientist couple who get married despite the woman thinking of him as only a friend. When he's drafted into the army and gets himself in trouble with his commanding officer, she decides to try and seduce the general in hopes of getting him a reprieve. This is absolutely a pre-code film, as it gets away with insinuating far more saucy plot details than a film could a few years later. The internet dubs this a comedy, but it's possible that much of the comedy is rooted in social mores I no longer have connections to, because it struck me as a lighthearted drama more than anything else, friendly characters more than jokes. It's an engaging enough watch, and both our primary leads, Kay Francis and Walter Houston, bring charisma to their roles. 1930 really had a thing for showing women going against the societal grain, usually resulting in their own downfall, so it's nice to see something work out for a woman for once. An interesting little flick. Night Swim follows a former baseball player and his family who buy a home with a pool so he can do water therapy for his MS. While the water seems to do wonders for his illness, the rest of the family starts seeing unsettling visions of a creature in the water, and so they start unraveling the mystery. Look, as someone who can't swim and finds water inherently scary, I was all prepared to be unsettled by this, but it doesn't take any advantage of the premise at all. I didn't find a single actual scare in here, and I was the prime audience. On top of that, the rules of the evil make very little sense in an irritating way. The dialogue is full of terrible exposition, and the acting is pretty thin. A good campy low-budget horror is a lot of fun, but this isn't that. It's just disappointingly bland all the way through. Journey's End is a 1930 film about a young World War I soldier who gets sent to serve under his sister's fiancé. The officer, however, is deeply ashamed of how the war has pushed him into bitter alcoholism and is terrified the young soldier will report the change in him back to his sister. This story feels very much like a play, set almost entirely in a single location and featuring long philosophical talks between characters. And while often that's right up my alley, this time it just felt tedious, like I was sitting around waiting impatiently for something to happen. When all the character and plot action does suddenly happen in the final 10 minutes of the movie, it felt like too little too late, as I was bored long before that. There are other better war films from this year, and other better melodramas. The Beekeeper is a Jason Statham action vehicle where he plays not only a literal keeper of bees, but also a retired member of a super-trained government group known as the Beekeepers. When someone close to him loses everything in an internet scam, he goes absolutely nuclear to find the people who targeted her. This is exactly what you think it's going to be going into it, or at least exactly what I thought it would be, a dumb, loud action flick where our protagonist goes around rampantly murdering people. So much of the Beekeeper metaphor and the plot exposition are delivered so clunkily that I honestly can't tell if it's intentional or not. The one saving grace for me was, to my surprise, Josh Hutcherson as the narcissistic startup mogul masterminding the whole thing. Hutcherson plays him with such vapid irritation that I did genuinely laugh out loud at some of his line deliveries. I admit I'm not at all the target demographic for this movie, so if you are someone who will enjoy the big fight scenes and not be bothered by lazy twists and painfully extended metaphors, this might work better for you than it did for me. The Great Beauty is an Italian movie following a journalist in his 60s as he wanders around Rome with his friends looking for creative inspiration. This is more art meditation than narrative, focusing heavily on the use of music and cinematography to create moody spaces to ponder beauty. And I would love to say that it worked for me, but in actuality, I was so incredibly bored. I'm not creatively captured by any of the visual or musical choices, and I could not care less about this cranky old man wandering around moping about not writing a book. Granted, that is the least generous way I could phrase it, but it's closest to how the movie made me feel. I remember thinking that's a very nice shot a few times while watching it, but none of the ensuing shots stuck with me long enough to actually remember them, and everything feels so static. If I'm going to immerse myself in this kind of art appreciation, I'd rather do it by going to an art museum with a great Spotify playlist and experience it more spatially, rather than spending 2.5 hours watching it unfold on a screen in front of me. This was critically acclaimed, so I admit I may be in the minority on this one, but it just did absolutely nothing for me. Killers of the Flower Moon is the newest Martin Scorsese epic, a 3-hour tale of the horrific plots by white men in 1920s Oklahoma to marry Osage women for their oil-rich land and then murder them. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone as one of these married couples, and Robert De Niro as DiCaprio's wealthy boss. Lily Gladstone has been recognized by the Oscars for this role, and deservedly so. She grounds the movie and keeps it from being solely centered on the murderers. Do I wish more of the movie had been focused on her? Absolutely. But it's well told overall, very much highlighting the deadly cruelty of racism and greed. I was struck especially by how the film chose to end and provide its epilogue to the story. A bold choice that was at first off-putting, but then seemed exactly on point with the rest of the movie. While I can't imagine wanting to watch it again, I do want to read the book now, and I'm glad I set aside the time to see it. The Holdovers takes place in an elite boarding school during the Christmas break, when most students and faculty have gone home, except for one student who has no place to go, and the teacher and lunch lady assigned to stay on campus as supervisors. This is one of those films that I've seen done badly a million times, focusing on small interactions between a unique set of characters and culminating in one or more of them learning some kind of lesson. What makes it work here is smart writing and a stellar trio of performances from Paul Giamatti, Dominic Sessa, and Divine Joy Randolph. All three of them get their own arcs and moments of growth in a way I really appreciate, and none of them are two-dimensional caricatures. There's also a nearly perfect blend of humor and drama in a way that keeps it from ever feeling either too fluffy or too cloying. There's a tough balancing act to pull off, but Alexander Payne nails it. And of course, it's all couched beautifully in this 1970s visual aesthetic, starting right off the bat with the credits and continuing to immerse us through the end. It's a meticulously crafted and effectively charming holiday movie that I can see continuing to grow on me. Diner follows a group of high school friends reuniting for a friend's wedding, and then they wander around talking about life and relationships and playing pranks on each other. I am frankly completely confused about the love for this movie. It's a weirdly difficult story to follow, with so many characters who look and act exactly alike. I kept mixing them up, and I couldn't get invested in any of them because none of them are interesting or good people, and there are so many different stories that never actually follow through. They just kind of disappear, and we don't even get fun philosophical ruminations on life the way you might get in other similarly structured movies. I know this is a beloved, critically acclaimed film, but I genuinely can't figure out which pieces of this are resonating with others or what it's even trying to do. While I'm posting my thoughts on it now, I may have to do a deeper dive to figure out what landed so badly for me but so well for others, and we'll have to see if that changes my mind. High Treason is a film from 1929 that imagines a future 20 to 30 years away in which peace is the expected societal standard worldwide, until a group of greedy financiers set out to start another world war and the women of the world have to band together and stop it. This is a very interesting premise, but unfortunately it doesn't quite land in execution, and I found myself tuning in and out of the movie. The digital transfer I saw wasn't great, though, and there are aspects of the plot that I genuinely missed, and I think it might have been due to the quality of the print. As I reread through the plot on Wikipedia, I kept thinking, hold on, that happened? How did I miss that? That's interesting. I think I need to schedule a time to rewatch it, to see if being able to follow the plot more clearly improves it, or if it's still just poorly executed, even with that extra understanding. Eyewitness is a Peter Yates thriller starring William Hurt as a janitor who is the only person known to be in the building when a wealthy man is murdered. He is in love with his local news anchor, played by Sigourney Weaver, and tries to spend time with her by teasing the possibility that he knows more about the murder than he lets on. But this, of course, puts a target on his back from the actual murderer. This is kind of a fun premise, and it's structured pretty well as far as letting us guess who the murderer is and how it happened. It also manages to explore some surprisingly poignant plot lines about veteran neglect and PTSD. It's less successful in setting up the romance, as Hurt's "oh shucks every man" comes across as more stalkerish than anything else, definitely not as charming as the movie thinks it is, but from a thriller standpoint, it's decently successful, even if not anything terribly special. Poor Things is a Yorgos Lanthimos film starring Emma Stone as a reanimated dead woman with the brain of a baby, then toddler, then child, and so on. As she grows and discovers more about the world around her, she sets off to explore, learn, and ultimately find herself. As one would expect with a Lanthimos film, this is a real weird movie. The premise is odd and it leans all the way into it, and the steampunk aesthetics of the world in which it's set, I absolutely fell in love with. The colors and design of the movie are absolutely stunning, and Stone is truly wonderful as our lead character. One of my favorite female characters on screen in years. Mark Ruffalo's supporting character is also extremely funny, basically every time he shows up, and is a great foil for Stone's straightforward honesty. I laughed so much throughout the film, but also found myself caring deeply about our main character, and marveling at the world building and pondering the deeper questions that the story brought up. Definitely my favorite movie of 2023, as well as my favorite so far from Lanthimos and probably from Stone. Nina Wu follows the story of an aspiring actress who gets her breakthrough as the lead in a big successful movie, only to then start having strange experiences in the aftermath that may or may not be real. I'm not going to get too spoilery beyond that. While often I'm not drawn into vaguely surreal stories where it's hard to tell reality from dreams, it's done quite well here, largely because our emotional connection to the character is never dampened by her experiences not being quote-unquote real. The story heavily features themes of young women being mistreated in the film industry, and that remains thematically central in all aspects of the story. So whether or not you can plot out the narrative, it's clear what the emotional underpinning is intended to be. The film ends with a bit of a twist that I did anticipate, but it brought out strong reactions from folks who saw it. Some thought it was minimizing some of the characters' most hurtful experiences. While I understand that point of view and wouldn't necessarily recommend the film to everyone because of that, I did not have that response to it, and instead left feeling deeply moved by the story I'd seen. River's Edge follows a group of teenagers, including Keanu Reeves and Crispin Glover, who learn that one of their friends has murdered his girlfriend in a fit of rage. We follow their reactions, from trying to help their friend hide out, to debating whether they should turn him in, to just trying to stay away from the whole thing. The film sets kind of a fascinating tone, where clearly big, dark things are happening, but it's also got this strange undercurrent of humor that at first I found off-putting. But then I realized where it was centered, and it suddenly really, really hit home for me. These teenage quote-unquote hooligans are so desperate to be taken seriously that they're almost impossible to actually take seriously. Obviously, their problems are serious and their questions are serious, but it truly captures that horribly awkward phase of life where all you want to do is yell, "I'm an adult," while not knowing yet how unlike an adult that will make you look. And that all snapped it into focus, and I found myself really loving these characters and their stubborn independence to do their own thing in the face of a group of adults who aren't much more capable than they are. There's a childish stubbornness to every person in this movie, and it's fascinating to watch it play out. I feel like this is one that I could rewatch a whole bunch and find new pieces of it every time I did. Asteroid City is a Wes Anderson film following a group of people staying in a small desert town named Asteroid City when they are visited by an actual alien. Or, well, to be more accurate, the movie is about a play that follows a group of people, etc., etc., etc. I frequently like Anderson's films, but seldom love any of them. There's no doubt he knows how to frame a scene and draw out dry comedic timing from his actors, but this one left me pretty cold, despite oddly enough being the premise I find most interesting across all of the director's work. Sci-fi and theater? That should be exactly what I love. Somehow, though, despite the enormity of the question, is there intelligent life elsewhere, and the absurdity inherent in a random visit, I laughed at very little, and felt even less. These characters feel overly broad, even for Anderson, leaving me almost nothing to hold on to emotionally, and the cold line deliveries feel dull and stilted rather than meticulously crafted. The two bright, vivid backdrops just highlight how much tonal color I'm missing in the rest of the film. A disappointment for me, though I'm not sure whether it's Anderson who dropped the ball or whether I just finally tired of him. The Little Mermaid is the live-action adaptation of Disney's classic 1989 animated film. It follows a mermaid named Ariel, who falls in love with a human prince and trades away her voice to the sea witch Ursula for a pair of legs and a chance to pursue her romance. While this isn't a perfect film by any means, and is definitely not as good as the original, there are quite a few things I appreciate about it. Halle Bailey as Ariel is fantastic, just the right combination of confident and vulnerable to make her easy to root for, and with, of course, a very lovely voice. The film also gives much more attention to Prince Eric, giving him a much more distinctive personality so that the romance between the two is actually convincing. Where it falls disappointingly flat are the visuals, particularly in the segments in the ocean, which are dark and gloomy with very few contrasting colors, making it both uninteresting and at times confusing to watch. The character design is upsetting too. Obviously, Flounder looks blah, but I was also completely let down by Ursula. She is so stunning in the animated film, but here her octopus tentacles are so completely disconnected from Melissa McCarthy's head and arms that it was actively distracting. I feel like this review is coming out piecemeal rather than giving a sense of the whole, but that's kind of how I had to process it. I liked it more than I didn't, but it was disappointingly unimaginative in its visuals. The Killer is David Fincher's newest film, starring Michael Fassbender as a hired assassin who botches a job and is hunted down for it. But when his lover is nearly killed in an attempt to get to him, he then turns around to hunt down the people trying to find him. Fassbender to me is a complete non-entity. I can't remember his face, I can't remember his voice, I don't recognize him when he shows up in movies. He is the perfect actor to be playing an anonymous assassin trying to always be forgettable, but unfortunately the whole movie is kind of like that for me. I've always enjoyed Fincher's visual style and ability to make even dark, grungy films like Fight Club and Seven seem visually arresting, but here it's flattened out in a sea of beige and brown, with nothing to really catch my eye. The story itself seems very in line with the tropes of the genre, never moving beyond them in any notable way. Really a disappointment from a talented director. Time Bandits is a Terry Gilliam film about a young boy who suddenly finds himself traveling through time with a group of dwarves who have stolen the time map. The film jumps between the boy's adventures meeting various historical figures and the overarching plot in which two powerful beings are wrestling for control of the time map. This sits in a really fun place between comedy and adventure, and it means that the whole film is just a blast to watch. And not just as an adult, I'm sure I'd have had just as much fun with it, even more if I'd watched it as a kid. I love the creativity of the different scenarios and the quick pace that moves us from adventure to adventure with no time to ever get bored with it. Terry Gilliam has directed a few of my favorite movies, and his slightly quirky take on the world is definitely on display here in the best way. The only quibble I have with it is the ending, which is a startling shift away from what the rest of the film seemed like, but I bet it might sit differently on a second viewing. American Fiction follows an African-American writer and professor who is frustrated that nobody wants his new book because it isn't black enough. On a whim, he churns out a novel poking fun at all of the tropes he sees that white audiences want out of their black books, and to his chagrin, it's a massive success. This film for me strikes the absolute perfect balance between comedy and drama, being both laugh-out-loud funny and genuinely heartbreaking. And Jeffrey Wright is of course so good in this, bringing out the frustration of his character and how it relates to his work and his family and his romantic relationships. While I'm still mulling over how all the narrative pieces fit together, I had a great time watching the film. It escalates both the serious and not so serious stakes at just the right place to keep me hooked the whole way through. Definitely a good watch, and I look forward to revisiting it again sometime. Anatomy of a Fall is about the mystery surrounding a man's death after he seemingly falls out of his attic window. The story follows the court case investigating whether he fell, jumped, or was murdered by his wife. I had high hopes for this one, and they might have been too high because ultimately I just liked this film okay. It's an interesting enough story, and it is intriguing to see all the different possibilities brought to life. The son's plotline was by far the most compelling, as he tries to work through his memories of the day and the new things he learns about his parents' relationship. Every time it recentered on the main woman, I just found my interest flagging. At the heart of it, I didn't really care whether she killed her husband or not, except for how it would affect her son. It's a good movie and it's worth watching, but I wasn't blown away by it the way I hoped I would be. Leo is a children's animated film about a class pet, Leo the lizard, who learns he's near the end of his lifespan and starts talking to the children in the class to help solve their problems and give his life meaning at the end. I am not usually a fan of Adam Sandler at all and was all prepared to hate this movie, but it's kind of delightful. There are a good amount of legitimately funny jokes, but on top of that, it's a children's movie that really is about kids, which a lot of modern animated films aren't. All the different fifth graders are written like real kids with real kids' problems. Well, mostly. There is a subplot featuring a babysitter drone that's a lot sillier, but they feel relatable, so it's fun to see them grow and gain confidence in themselves. The songs are unspectacular but not annoying. The opener in particular mostly works. A surprising hit in the family animation genre. A Face in the Crowd stars Patricia Neal as a young radio journalist and Andy Griffith as the homeless drunk man she finds in jail and turns into a radio star. Together, the two of them navigate the path of fame as he gains more and more of a platform. This is a pretty incredible movie, all the more so for being so prescient about influencer and media personality culture all the way back in the 1950s. Neal and Griffith also turn in some incredible performances here. Griffith's louder-than-life personality as Lonesome Rhodes always teeters on the edge, right between charming and threatening, and Neal's confident but compassionate producer is an excellent counterpart. The ending doesn't land exactly where I thought it would and ended up really impressing me. I'm going to remember that for a while. An extremely accessible older film with a lot to say about fame and celebrity. Krull is a high fantasy story about a young warrior prince whose whole family is massacred and whose princess fiancée is kidnapped by a mysterious evil group. He gathers a group of fighters to help take down the evil and get his fiancée back. My journey through Peter Yates' filmography continues to be strange and fascinating as he just abruptly decides to tackle a totally different genre with every movie. He hadn't yet gone after high fantasy at this point in his career, so I guess he decided it was time. I can see the seeds of a really fun story here. I love some of the design elements. The scene with the woman in the web is visually captivating, and the design of the evil castle is like some weird surrealist art installation, which is great. The story is pretty rushed, though, with not quite enough fleshed out characterization to justify the many, many tragic deaths and moving final words. It's a fun watch with enough creativity to be engaging, but it did make me wish there had been a little more substance to it. The Zone of Interest follows a German family where the patriarch manages Auschwitz, and he and his family live just on the other side of the wall. The story mostly just looks at the family's day-to-day life, which on the surface is mundane, but of course it can't be, because interspersed throughout all of it are the sounds, smells, sights, and unspoken understanding of the horrors mere feet from them. The movie is done well, but I think I admire its impact intellectually more than responded to it myself. It is unsettling to watch these people being able to tune out so much of their environment just so they can move forward in peace with dinners and gardening and visits from family, and it is an important reminder of how easy it is to isolate ourselves and think, as long as I'm okay, everything's okay. Sandra Huller turns in an especially good performance here. What a year she had in 2023. So yeah, glad this movie exists, glad that it's getting attention. Black and White follows a group of white teenagers obsessed with black hip-hop culture, an athlete being offered the chance to fix a game, and a filmmaker documenting the whole thing. This is a weird mess of a movie, without a coherent through line or interesting characters. They all seem kind of randomly thrown together, without a purpose for any of it. Just when I think one character is being set up as the primary arc of the story, it zigzags and abandons them. Done well, that could make this an interesting ensemble piece, but none of these pieces work individually, much less as a whole. The acting in this isn't good, even from seasoned actors, and the writing is pretentious and silly, and the wobbly camera gets old real fast. It just doesn't work at all, and I found very little to like about it.